Peace, family. Vie Darling, the Cosmic Queen, and your intergalactic interpreter. And I feel like I need to do a reading because I just feel like there's a lot of friction going on in the energy, in the atmosphere. I don't know if it is friction that is coming from the astrology or whether it's friction that is, well, I mean, it's always in the astrology. You can always find it in the astrology, but I just think that I want to find out like where exactly it's coming from and delve into it a little bit more. What I'm gonna do is there's been a lot of heart healing that's been going on, and I want to just look at I'm going to use the Rose Oracle deck to get an overall, what is your heart telling you? Like, what is the overall message? What is the overall lesson that we need to be internalizing? And then, what do I want to do? I think I'll do a mundane, like, physical world, mental and emotional world, and actually I think I'll do, let's just start with that. We'll start with that and we'll see where it goes from there. But I definitely want to get some insight into what's happening with the social world, what's happening with money and finances. As I said in a previous reading, we have a grand trine. It's kind of a grand air trine. It's also kind of a grand water trine because it is comprised of parts that are, it's a true sidereal. So it's not equidistant. We're looking at like the actual sizes of the constellations. And what did I say about this? We have Mars in a separating conjunction now with Mercury. Mars is on the first, well, it's on the final degree of Libra, moving into Scorpio. Mercury's already in Scorpio. Neptune and Saturn in Pisces, both retrograde, mind you, are conjunct. It is separated conjunction. And they are trining Jupiter, which is in Gemini, 8th house, trining Mercury and Mars. So the first thing that I want to point out is that Mars is not going to be happy anymore because Mars wants to go, 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 do, fight, fight, fight. Cultivate is the thing that I think about with Mars. So, but Libra is not about that. Libra is magnetic. It's ruled by Venus. It's about, it's about attraction. Like, I attract, I don't chase. Whereas Mars really wants to chase, which is why people will be like, oh, like, you're in your masculine energy if you are chasing after, like, men or whatever. And I would encourage people to stop thinking about it in, like, terms of masculine and feminine, which are socially charged and coded, and start thinking about it more so as, like, you're in your Martian energy. Because other masculine signs and placements are not necessarily associated with going and doing and pursuing. They can be associated with showing, like Leo is associated with showing, and being seen and being seen. And that's true also for, Sagittarius. Like, yes, they are expressional energies, they are outgoing energies, but that idea of chasing after things, I think, is a corruption, is the word that I'm going to use here. I think it's a corruption. So Mars isn't going to be happy in the sign of Libra because what I think is that it wants to control things, but it has to, it wants to do things, but it has to wait for things to happen, which it's not going to enjoy. And I know how that feels. And I do think with this conflict of interests, because we are talking about conflict and fractious energy, fragmented energy, this period of integration is going to highlight where there are fragmentations and how those fragmentations are impacting us, how they're affecting us, what we have to do in order to, what we have to do in order to transform. One thing that I want to say is like something that's coming up for me. I'm just going to share it because I don't know why Spirit is like bringing this up, but I'm just going to go with it. I'm picking up as like people who like misunderstand you despite how clear you might be. They want to misunderstand you. They do not want to understand you. They do not want to understand you. And this might not be, this is, for some people, it is more purposeful. I do think that some people do this like on purpose, like contrarians and stuff. But for some people, it's because they so desperately do not want to disabuse themselves of the idea that they have of themselves, that they will like pretend that they don't see what's right in front of them. I'm thinking about somebody I know who just seems to be like incredibly oblivious, and it's actually really like astonishing to me. And it feels to me as if it has to be purposeful. And, I've given a lot of grace to this person, but people, more and more as time goes on, I feel like extending less grace, but like people have also pointed out like that they think that it is a thing that like that person it's a failing on their part. But I think that this person doesn't like mean harm. I think that like they have developed like a narrative around themselves. And I'll say that it's like exceptionalism. Like they've done a really great job regardless of any, obstacles that and I'm not even going to say a really great job because their life is very mediocre. I don't think that it's great by any stretch of the imagination, but they've made it work for themselves to achieve mediocrity, and stability in mediocrity in spite of whatever kind of like other stuff may be going on external to them. And, this idea of meritocracy where it's like, well, if I was able to do that, then like, why can't you, or why can't other people? And in order for them to labor under that kind of like delusion or illusion or narrative, they have to willfully ignore structural issues, and like they have to willfully ignore, current events and things like this. So do I think that this is a bad person? No. But do I think that they are committed to operating from a paradigm of consciousness and thought that is fundamentally and factually inaccurate and flawed and fraught? Yes. Because I think that they're operating from a space of fear, and they have to do that in order to maintain these narratives that make them feel safe and good about themselves. Because I also think that deep down they don't feel very good about themselves. I think that they are somebody who, you know, is like okay with themselves as long as they're not being reminded of, like, you know, I guess, like, whatever whatever they don't have or whatever. And I'll say this much as well, they're a very plain person, and I think that, like, playing it safe and, like, being plain and quote unquote normal is a whole part of that too, where it's like, well, yeah, I just think that that's actually kind of where I'm gonna leave it. Yeah, and I also think that it's just like, it just frustrates me to no end when people like this are in positions of power, but I'm not going to get too deep into, like, that personal experience because I didn't even intend to bring it up, but I do want to say that, like, when people, because this is a reading about this fragmented energy, we have to accept people for who they are, and when they show us that they're committed to being oppositional to us, being an op, if you will, then we just have to accept that. You know what I mean? Like, if we see that somebody's like, unless you do what I want you to do, we're gonna have problems. Like, if somebody is like that, then that's just not a safe person, and that's not a person that, like, we want as sovereign people that we want to be around. So I do think that, like, you know, I've heard other mystics and readers talk about this, but I do think that, like, right now, a lot of people with narcissistic personalities and or tendencies, dark triad traits, and I'm not stigmatizing people with borderline when I say this, but, you know, this is a common manifestation of these kinds of behaviors and traits. Yeah, I think that a lot of these kinds of people are having, like, crash outs and meltdowns as more people who are, you know, who identify as empaths are stepping into their sovereignty. That is something that I've seen a lot of people talking about, and I do think that that's true. I do think that there's a collapse of these structures that buoy up, like, these imbalances of power and domination paradigms, whereby, like, the structuring of society in our social interactions doesn't make any sense whatsoever. That is all collapsing. And I think that also, like, when people are like, you know, what do they say? Oh, like, late stage capitalism or blah, blah, blah. It's like, we haven't been in late stage capitalism for a while, at least a decade. Like, it is dead. It is dead, and it's over. And that is what we are living in, actually, is the bloated carcass of it. And I don't think that people genuinely know what that, like, take the time to process what that means through their own body and through their own experience to realize what that genuinely actually means. And for that reason, I think that, like, people just say that and, like, it means nothing to them. But one has to think, like, if your whole entire life was built on the constructs of that society and you don't actually have an identity, it's just what you've been prescribed by a society that is sick and frankly demonic and evil, then what's going to happen to you? If the only reason that you've had any social power is because of the abuses and abominations and abhorrent realities of this society, have afforded you the power and, you know, prizes of that you have, then yeah, as it is collapsing and falling apart, if you are married to that ideology, or if that ideology has informed everything about you, then it is going to, like, it is going to be, you know, you're going to be a crash out. You know what I mean? So I think that, like, anybody, it really is like colonizers versus non-colonizers. You don't actually have to be, like, necessarily indigenous to where you are in order to be pro-indigenous. and to be doing the decolonial work on yourself, you don't actually have to be indigenous to where you are, but you can embody that ideology. And I do think that it is like conflict between people who embody the ideology of colonial violence and domination coming into conflict with people who embody indigenous ways of engaging with life. And I have to name that because, yeah, like indigenous people have always waged wars and stuff like that, but there was also an understanding of like the value and respect of life that does not exist anymore. And one thing that I have to say is, like, as an indigenous person, as an African indigenous person, like, the implementation of these social structures that we exist in now are seen as alien. That is something that is part and parcel of indigenous African cosmologies. These ideologies are not from here. Extraterrestrial beings and civilizations are things that are inherent parts of and integral, important parts of our cosmologies across the continent. And this is true for many indigenous societies. And anytime that somebody's going to be like, oh, conspiracy theorists, oh, like tinfoil hat, I'm going to call you on being fucking anti-indigenous. I'm going to call you on that, because if I have to sit here and give credence to your religion that involves cannibalism, like ritualizing cannibalism every first Sunday, and that turns a blind eye to the abuse of children, the sexual abuse of children, and was the driving force behind the most brutal, disgusting, inhumane treatment of people on this planet, if you think I'm going to sit here and validate and legitimize anything that you believe, you're insane. Especially because this civilization couldn't even make it fucking 500 years. Meanwhile, all the rest of us, our civilizations have existed for millennia. So just logically speaking, I think that I'm more inclined to believe that ours is more valid than that. And it's no shade, but the anti-indigeneity, I'm just so fucking sick of it at this point that, like, I can't even. And the fact that, like, time and again, we are being proven correct over and over and over again. So much so that then, like, you know, with the Dogon tribe, like, these people had, like, decided to be like, oh, well, you know, a European man must have gone and told them about the weight of the binary star in Sirius B. No, if their whole entire religion is about it, I would imagine that they knew about that, especially because their civilization has existed longer than yours. You know what I mean? Like, it's not just like, oh, recently, it's like hundreds of years of anti-indigenous abuse. And for somebody who identifies as a pro-indigenous person, as an indigenous person, I'm just over it. And so, yeah, all that to say, like, I do think that it is friction between not only people who embody those colonial ideals and ideologies, but also friction and conflict, like out and out conflict between like those groups of people, but also like those parts of ourselves first and foremost, because as above, so below, as within, so without, it's just an externalization of like this warfare that's going on within ourselves. Both of my parents are half indigenous and half Americo-Liberian. Americo-Liberians were instituted a settler colonial social structure in my country. So I've seen firsthand and also experienced firsthand, or rather I know secondhand and have witnessed firsthand and also experienced firsthand that the inner conflict of those two ways of being in conflict within a person, and the kind of violence that people enact against themselves because of these two opposing ideologies. And, you know, I think that, like, as we are talking about, like, transcending binary opposition and stepping outside of binary opposition, I think that, like, it's not either or, and I don't think that it was ever supposed to be either or. I think that, like, there has to be a third other solution. So, like, when people are like, it's either communism or capitalism, and it's like, well, that's just literally not even true. There's so many other economic systems, and, like, and also, if the one extreme doesn't work, then I guarantee you that the other extreme doesn't work. There is a third mysterious solution that is balance and harmony and meeting in the middle, and getting rid of all of the things that don't work and keeping the things that do work and optimizing upon that information. You know what I mean? So I think that's a lot of what is going on, because, like, the person that I'm talking about is a person of color. They are either first generation American or an immigrant themselves. And so when they said that to me, I was just like, what are you, like, what? I was just, like, truly flabbergasted. And other people that I've shared that experience with have definitely seen it in a more negative light than I initially did. But, you know, this has come up in the reading, and this is what, like, I've been asked to express. It's like, with Mars leaving the sign of Libra and moving into the sign of Scorpio, and Mercury is already there in Scorpio. We also have the sun in Libra, and it's just now entering Libra, so Libra season is just now really starting. What that tells me is that, like, I think that with Mars in Libra this whole time, it's been, like, and this is my experience too, an agitation of, like, people pressing your boundaries and people pressing your buttons, and you not wanting to fuck shit up, but, like, getting to that point where it's like, you're gonna have to, or engaging in subversive forms of conflict, but perhaps not direct. You know what I mean? And Libra, I would not say that Libra is actually a peacekeeper, if I'm being honest. I think in my personal experience, Libras are incredibly passive aggressive and manipulative, and like to start shit and then, like, run away from the things that they start. That is my experience with a lot of Libras. And, you know, I know that there are some who are not like that, but every sign has a negative or, like, a toxic, sick expression. And unfortunately, more people than not are toxic and sick because they are infected by the disease of this colonial paradigm. And also, every sign has a positive, beneficial, generative expression. And it takes a lot to embody those characteristics more than the toxic characteristics. And nobody's ever going to be perfect. Nobody's ever going to be, like, only the best expression of those characteristics. And I think that actually that's something that, like, I don't know, I'm picking up this energy of Los Angeles a lot right now, but it's, like, really at the top of my head. Like, I'm seeing this so much. I don't know why, but I'm gonna keep going with the reading. This idea of people being, like, I think that internalizing an unspoken idea that one day I'm gonna become the best version of myself, and that means that I'll be perfect. You know what I mean? It's like, no, everybody is always going to have stuff that they have to work on. But if you know that you're doing your best to walk in your integrity and to do the best that you can in as many situations as you possibly can, because I don't believe that people do that. I know that there's a common thing in, like, the wellness community and, like, the mental health and illness, like, community, which are both communities that I've existed in for a long time. over a decade on both ends. People will be like, everybody's just doing the best that they can. I guarantee you that that's not true. I promise you it's not. And the moment that you start to realize that that's not true and hold people accountable, the easier your life is going to be, because it's going to make making choices a lot easier for you. And it's also going to mean that you're going to stop taking responsibility for other people's shit. When I'm constantly like trying to quit smoking cigarettes, but it's hard because I'm sober and I don't have nearly as many of the vices that I used to have back when I didn't used to be sober. And it's one of the only things that like I indulge in. And so I'll go long periods of time where I won't smoke cigarettes. And then, like, there will be short, brief periods of time, maybe a week, maybe 2 weeks, where I will smoke, like, a cigarette a day or something like this. And it is gross, and it sucks, and it is what it is. But, you know, I know that I don't always do my best. I know that shit. You know what I mean? Like, I know that there are things that I could do that would disrupt the impulse to smoke a cigarette and the actual smoking of the cigarette. I know that there are things that I could do to disrupt that flow, but I don't do them because I don't want to, because what I want to do is smoke the cigarette. That's what I want to do. And so I do it. And I know that I'm not doing my best. I didn't even try. I know that I didn't. And I can accept that about myself. And I will say this much, when you can be self-aware, like, that really pisses people off. Because for me to be like, yeah, I know I didn't do my best. And there are going to be a lot of times throughout my life where I'm just not going to do my fucking best. I know I could have done better, but I didn't. You know what I mean? People who love to lie to themselves that they did the best that they could when they know deep down in their heart that they didn't, those people are going to hate the fuck out of you. Okay, and so let me just say, I didn't fucking do my best. I didn't. And I know that because I've done better. And it's like, well, at that time, that was the best you could do. No, it wasn't. I'm telling you it wasn't. I know it wasn't the best that I can do. So stop fucking making excuses for me. I just want us to all live in the truth that I didn't do my best and I made a decision. And that's okay, because what it means, you cannot be unconditionally loving when you're operating like that. If you cannot still love me as a human being because I didn't do my best in that moment, and I knew that and I still didn't do it, you don't love me unconditionally. If you can only love and validate people's humanity when you are laboring under the impression that they're always trying their best, then you don't love them. Not unconditionally, and I don't believe in love that is conditional. If it is conditional, it is not love. That's what I believe. So that all being said, you got to stop like gaslighting yourself, because this is what's also perpetuating those negative karmic cycles. And I'm saying you as in the royal you, and this is a self read as well. I said I felt friction in the energy and I wanted to get a read on what it is, because it's not just me. I know that a lot of people are experiencing this right now. And yeah, what I'm also picking up is that it's like, I'm thinking also like in terms of like filmmaking, and what I'm picking up is like, one person wants one thing and the other person wants another thing. And in this relationship dynamic, are they able to see eye to eye and compromise? Or is one person going to doggedly and single-mindedly pursue their own desires? And those of us who are committed to solutions, let's say we are solutions oriented, are going to be the kind of people who want to come to a compromise, right? That we see as fair. And it's like, okay, well, it should always be 50-50. That's not true, because equity, context. It shouldn't always be 50-50. But also admitting to ourselves what we are willing to give and what we're not willing to give at any given moment in time. Sometimes I don't have 50-50 to give. Sometimes I only have 10% to give. And if the ideal is to meet at the center, which is 50-50, and I fall short of that, you know, what are you going to do? This is acceptance of life on life's terms, of humanity. And I think that a lot of people, like, I often hear colonizers, and when I say this, I'm not just talking about, like, people who literally are colonizing places. Like, I'm also talking about people who operate from a colonial mentality, because I know other people who are indigenous and they operate from a colonial mentality, and I'm including them in this construct of colonizers. People who embody this kind of, like, ideology, they have, like, this kind of rhetoric, right? And so it's like, oh, humans are by nature violent, or humans are by nature this or that. And it's like, I don't think so, because we can't know what human nature is outside of this violent structure that's been imposed upon us, because we were not like this necessarily prior to these different waves of colonization that started in Mesopotamia, right? We don't know. And if you read 𝗂𝗪𝗁-𝘁, she talks about how in South America and in Central America, I believe, those empires were already weakened by the poor morale that subjugated people were experiencing. And that made it easier for the Spanish and Portuguese conquistadors to take over. This is also similar to what happened in North America, in part because the indigenous people had already, there was a huge disease plague that wiped out 2/3 of their population. And every other time that they'd been invaded, even by the Vikings, they had won every single time. But because they had lost 2/3 of their population, that time they had to, they didn't win, and they had to negotiate. And you might say, well, you know, they were waging war before anyway. Well, who the fuck wants their land to be invaded? Nobody. So, yeah, they were waging war. But then they decided, okay, the diplomatic thing to do, and this is why it's coming up for Libra. Yes, exactly. Oh my God, I got it. For Mars and Libra and Mercury and Scorpio. This is exactly why it is. Because if your desire is to be diplomatic, but you are dealing with belligerent people, and belligerence doesn't always mean, like, you know, being loud and bombastic. I am a Sagittarius. One of my family gods is 𝗂𝗍, who is related to the planet Jupiter. And so, like, in the divination, one of my divinations with the shrine priests, they said, like, you know, this is, like, my family, particularly on my dad's side. But I would say, okay, like, are very loud and, you know, are just Jupiterian in that way. We love to eat and, like, become big, like, which is very Jupiterian, very jovial, like, have a very deep, loud belly laugh, very booming voice, you know, that echoes throughout all. That is how we are because of our aura, because of who our family god is, 𝗂𝗍. And also I'm a Sagittarius, right? So, but you can be loud and, like, have a big energy and not be violent and belligerent. You can be very subtly and quietly belligerent as well. That is to say, people who are passive aggressive, people who do microaggressions, things like this. That is belligerence. Okay. So if you want to be a diplomatic person and you are trying to do diplomacy with a belligerent party, let's talk about like what's going on between the US and Venezuela. You know what I mean? Or honestly, the US and anybody. The US and Mexico, the US and Canada, like everybody that we've been dealing with in the past like 8+ years since 2016. And honestly, since longer than that, but like, let's say specifically 2016 for obvious reasons. We need to understand that like, you cannot be diplomatic with someone who's committed to being belligerent. You cannot be diplomatic with someone who's committed to being immature, somebody who's committed to being petty, somebody who's committed to being divisive, somebody who's committed to dominance, to causing harm. You cannot be diplomatic with those people. You cannot be, if you are somebody who understands nuance and you've graduated from binary thinking and have developed a sophisticated means of engaging with the world. So you've transcended 2D consciousness into 3D, let alone 4D consciousness. And once again, you cannot say that you are somebody who has progressed to 5D consciousness if you are not somebody who can actually understand and understand unconditional love. So coming back to that point about like, if you can't accept me and love me unconditionally, and for me in this framework, unconditional love is wanting you to get all of your needs met. I don't have to like you, but I do accept you and I do love you. I want what's best for you. I don't know what that is. I'm just another person. I'm another bozo on the bus. I don't know what's best for you. I have to have the humility to express that. But I do believe that there is a power greater than all of us that does know what's best for you. And I hope that it can come into your life and transform you to the best version of yourself. I hope that for every single person on this planet. 100% I do. Sometimes I'm not so good at it, and I feel myself sinking into hate, and I think about certain people. I'll give this example very simply. Some people piss me off so much and they trigger me so badly. Some people who are also sober that I'm like, I fucking hope that person, and then I don't even say it because I know I'm fucking wrong. And I know that that goes against the principles that I have chosen to embody. I chose that. That is my choice. And if that's what I say I follow, I have to actually follow it. I have to actually live it and do it. It doesn't mean that it comes easy to me every single day, but I can say this much: it gets easier the longer that you do it, and when you actually develop the framework and for your life and the tools and the community and the environment for it to be easier, you can do all of that. But yeah, I think things like that, and it's like, why? Like, that's fucked up. That's evil. And that's not who we are. So who are we? We're somebody who wants the best for them. When my ego is getting in the way and I'm just like, yeah, well, they crossed me, so like, let them know what a bad motherfucker I am. No. You know what I mean? No. Because that vengeance shit, that petty shit, we know from the past cycle. I don't remember what was in Scorpio, or I think it was actually like Pluto maybe it's Pluto in Capricorn, but it had to do a lot with like Pluto retrograde. And I don't remember what was happening in the tropical chart, but this was coming up a lot last summer and last year. This understanding and understanding that revenge is a waste of fucking time. I saw somebody post a TikTok about this. It was an African person, and they posted a TikTok, and they were just like, essentially saying something that I also believe, which is just like, you must have a lot of free time on your hand to be jealous of other people, to mind other people's business. You're complaining about how you don't have money or you don't have the success that you want, but you have a lot of free time to be worrying about what other people have going on, to be creating made up conflicts with other people who don't even know you exist, probably. I don't do that shit. That's why I've been able to cultivate success in my career. I'm in my flop era right now. I'm coming out of my fucking flop era. Saturn return. You know what I mean? It's been fucking hell. but I'm a better person for it. But at the end of the day, like, I mean, I did a fucking performance at 𝗪𝗂𝗱𝘁 earlier this year, over the summer. And then I went to London on an all expense paid writing residency. And my writing is being published next month. So I'm doing pretty decently in my career, all things considered. And despite all of the other things, I can admit that. And that's because I don't go around minding other people's business and creating conflicts where there isn't one. I mind my fucking business. You know what I mean? If you're not experiencing the life that you want to live, you got to ask yourself, why? What do I need to change? And unless the person is inspiring you, don't fucking worry about what the fuck they got going on. Energy is our only currency in spirit, but that's neither here nor there. Energy goes where focus flows, or energy flows where focus goes, or whatever the fuck they say. What you focus on is what you feed your energy to, and it will manifest in your life one way or another. So if you're sitting around thinking about how you're not as good as that person, you're going to create more situations for you to feel exactly that way, and you're going to put into the universe more of that energy to reflect back to you that belief that you have about yourself. Whether or not other people told you that, you don't have to believe it and you don't have to embody it. I've spent the past 3 years listening to subliminals and working with multiple therapists and working, like, you know, programs of recovery to get all of that, like, self-hating bullshit that was encoded into me through abuse and also living in the social structure that we do. I've done that. If you're not willing to do the work to fight for yourself and to fight for your own freedom, then why should anybody else? And why are you even going to complain about it? You know what I mean? So that's what I have to say about unconditional love. That if you don't live that way, if you don't love yourself unconditionally and you don't love other people unconditionally, then you are not at the 5D new earth that you're so looking for. You're looking for fucking extraterrestrials to come save you. No, like, you have to save yourself. Nobody outside of me could have saved me from the sickness that was inside of me. I had to save myself. And the only way that I could do that was by facing it. Sure, I'd spent my whole life repressing it, drinking alcoholically, drugging, partying, all that stuff, repressing it, so that I didn't have to engage with it. And people would say, yeah, I understand why you would do that. I sure do understand why I would do that. And I'm not going to hold my feet over the fire for doing that. But at a certain point, wanting better for yourself has to be more than you wanting to feel sorry for yourself, and also or wanting to stay in a position of just keep things the same. Nothing changes if nothing changes. But so if you're trying to, like, make it work with people who are committed, and once again coming back to this idea of diplomacy versus belligerence. If you're trying to make it work with people who are committed, and I will also let me run it back actually, because this really relates to the reading that I did about, the download that I was, like, processing about Marduk and Yahweh. And this goes back to when I first started as the resident astrology for Sad Girls Club. And it was Aries season 2018, and one of the downloads that I got, and well, it was actually, you know, I would do research on every sign every season. When you do things like that, especially back then, because I was, like, kind of starting out in, like, this, like, professional aspect of my practice. I had not prior to that ever thought that this was something that I would ever share with the world. Especially because my dad was like, you have to keep this secret or else people are going to do this and that to you. And if I'm being honest, he was completely right. But, you know, we're in a different time, and this is part of what I came here to this earth to do. But yeah, Mars is actually before being a warring planet, Mars was an agricultural planet. It was a god of agriculture, not war. That changed, and I think that changed when human settlements went from being, or human societies went from being nomadic to settlements. And if you want to know more about that, I would encourage you to read *Sapiens* by Yuval Noah Harari. It is a fantastic book. I would encourage you to read it, even if you don't want to know more about that. But he talks about that, and I think, and how grain used us to like give it dominance on the planet. He talks about, and yeah, I won't say more about that, but I think that if that's something that like sounds interesting to you, I encourage you to read it. And yeah, so Mars is about cultivation. It's like, if you're gonna go out and get stuff, it's not about dominating others or like defeating others. It's about, tilling your own field. And I'm not a farmer. My dad and like my grandma and like his side of the family are farmers, but like I did not learn that because I grew up with my mom, but and her side of the family. But I don't know how like farming goes, but that's essentially what it's about. Like, you sow your seeds, you till your soil, you do what you gotta do in your fucking garden, and you don't go about worrying about other people's gardens. The only time, and this is what they say, it's better to be a warrior in the garden than a gardener in the war. The only time when you're a warrior in the garden, you don't need to go out and like go fuck around in other people's gardens and cause like hubbub and hummock other people in their garden. You just need to protect your garden. And consider that if you're constantly having to protect your garden, maybe you need to change environments. I think that right now, I know for myself, this is the case, so I can speak for myself, but I do feel like it's like really deep-seated ideologies and cycles that are coming up to be cleared. And I think that things that we've just had like blind spots to, that are, it's like you may have even been like, really, that is a thing that I have to clear, like, just recognizing that. And for me, whenever I feel hopeless is when I'm just like, okay, well, we better just end it all. But asking your higher power, asking your innermost self for a solution to this feeling that you might be experiencing, if you don't know how to engage with whatever it is that's coming up for you, is what I would recommend. Alright, so a lot of channeling off of those signs, but Mercury has to do with our mental faculties, thoughts, cognition, speaking, comprehension, all of that good stuff. And that being in the sign of Scorpio is really helping us to understand how and why and what we're doing that is undermining our personal power. And when Mars gets into Scorpio proper, like, I really do feel like shit's gonna hit the fan, where it's like all these people who were relying upon, I was on TikTok earlier today and someone was like, all of the empaths are like in their villain era, and like the people who were relying on them for supply are crashing out now. Or I don't know if that's what they said, but that is what I said in the beginning of the video, in the beginning of this reading. It's like the people who do not provide sufficient light for themselves because they're codependent and they're not sovereign. They are, whether or not they are a out and out narcissist or like sociopath or whatever, antisocial personality disorder, but anybody who is like embodying what I described earlier as narcissistic tendencies or characteristics, any of these kinds of people, and I mean that is the nature of Western society, ultimately. Like, that is the nature of colonialism. I don't have what I need, so I need to go and invade somebody else and take it from them. You know what I mean? And exploit them. That's vampirism, very clearly and obviously. So, I'm trying to like do this, but I feel I'm just tired, to be honest. And it feels like time just flew by today. Anyway, so people are looking at the ways that they undermine their own integrity, but integrity and personal power as they relate to one another, and authority, especially over themselves. So like autonomy. Yeah, that's what we're looking at with Mercury in Scorpio. And I do think that like as Mars moves into Scorpio, we're going to see more of this. And with the sun in Libra, it is really about our like balance of power in these social contracts that we have, a la John Locke, Venus and Virgo. Yeah, it's just like we're not able to continue allowing people to harm us and to extract from us and to take from us. If having boundaries and like being yourself is like something that is putting you into conflict with others or like whatever, I do think that when Mars enters into Scorpio, it's going to really be like the straw that broke the camel's back. And I do think that like there might be like expressive, like out and out conflict that happens with people on the basis of power dynamics and imbalance of power and infringing upon people's personal autonomy. So that's something to prepare for, I guess. I mean, it's going to be happening relatively soon because Mars is at the final degree. I mean, it's basically on 0 degrees of Scorpio. So, yeah, that's something to prepare for. And like I said, like, you know, you don't have to, like, go tit for tat. You don't have to go toe to toe. You don't have to stand 10 toes down. You don't owe anybody loyalty, least of all people. If you barely even know somebody, you have to really ask yourself, is this really worth my emotional energy? Is this worth the energy for me to like involve myself in this interaction? If it's not, then don't do it. And like I said before, like if you can tell that somebody is committed to being belligerent, and very beginning, if people are committed to misunderstanding you, you don't engage with them. And that's like, you don't try to be diplomatic with those people. And, you know, something that like I've heard a lot in terms of like healing and stuff will be like, oh, well, you have to figure out how to like compromise. But like, no, the kind of people that I'm talking about when I say committed to being belligerent and like these people with narcissistic traits and personalities, they're not the kind of people that you can be diplomatic with. And that's something that every expert on narcissism and narcissistic personalities and dark triad personalities will tell you. It is only people who are codependent who try to make it work with these kinds of people. And I'm going to say this much too for people who are like, oh, like, yeah, if your partner is a fucking narcissist and you're like, well, I'm going to try and make it work for the kids. Your kids don't need to be subjected to narcissistic abuse either. I know my uncle isn't, I don't think he's a narcissist, but my uncle, he cheated a lot on my aunt, I think. But him and my aunt had problems for years, but they were waiting until their youngest children graduated high school before they got divorced and like moved out of the house from with one another. And my cousin, who's the oldest of them, she's just a couple years older than me, would constantly say that she just wished that they would like get a divorce already because she was so sick of it. And it's just like, and that was like years ago. You know, we were in our 20s when they finally got divorced. So I know for myself, I'm really grateful that my parents got divorced. I'm so happy that I didn't have to grow up around that. Because I genuinely, like, I used to be like, well, I wish that, like, my dad had been around to, like, protect us or defend us, but I don't think he would have. So, like, it would have just been I would have been even angrier, probably. Either way, it was just gonna be crazy, no matter what. You know what I mean? So, like, if you are, like, looking for excuses to not make an uncomfortable, scary choice, stop that. You know what I mean? Like, if it's like, oh, like, I don't want to leave because of the kids, they shouldn't have to experience that stuff, and they shouldn't have to witness you experience that. You know what I mean? I know so many people who as kids felt like they had to protect their parent from another person because their parent was chronically getting into unhealthy relationships and like they had to protect them. Don't fucking put kids through that shit, because like you're supposed to be their protector, not the other way around. You know what I mean? So this also comes up as like ideologies, like, once again, these ideologies that are harmful, and it's on purpose that they are this way, like convincing you that divorce is bad and you need to stay in a relationship that's bad. Like, I do feel like that is part of why a lot of people have a problem with like spirituality. I'm not even talking about religion. A lot of people's issue with spirituality and with God is really a problem with religion. And they're too dogmatic and will probably too hurt to even consider anything else. So, you know, like people who are like, oh, well, my parents didn't get divorced because like they don't believe in that because of religion, so I had to deal with all this growing up. It's like, you know, that's fucked up. I personally do not believe that my higher power wants me to be in situations where I'm being treated badly and where I'm suffering. And, you know, that's just me. But like, if the God that you believe in wants you to suffer, then I just gotta ask you why you fuck with that God. Have you ever considered like why? And also maybe, I don't know, consider something different. I know that nobody who like interacts with like my content is that way, but it's something that comes up in a lot of my readings, and it's something that comes up in a lot of like, for my own self as somebody who's recovering from serious religious trauma. That's really important. And so this conglomeration of energy, including the sun in Libra in the 10th house, and this is happening in the first house, so it's like real primal shit, you know what I mean? Or that's the 12th house, my bad. Yeah, honestly, I feel like people have been trying it, and with the sun in the 12th house in Libra, I mean, it's not going to stay in the 12th house, obviously. But if Mars is entering into Scorpio there, I don't think it's going to be there for long. Let's see the placements. Mars, because I don't think Mars, it's not in Libra. It's not in Mars, or it's not there quite yet. But it will be soon. So we're not going to necessarily read for the 12th house, but what I do think that we're perceiving is like fears around our own perception of ourselves and like negative perceptions of selves, how we're being seen, how we're being misperceived right now. But do expect that you will be highly visible in Libra season. And I do also think, and like when Mercury or Mars rather moves into Scorpio, and I do also think that like these conflicts are to remove those parties that are draining you of your light, that are obscuring your light, obfuscating your light, misappropriating it, misusing it, disrespecting you, all of this kind of stuff. And yeah, that's the long and short of it. I think that a lot of people will be attracted to you in this time. But, you know, it's also important to consider that sometimes people don't know what that means and they don't know what to do with that. If it feels like destabilizing to their sense of safety, then they might lash out and they might like try to harm you because of your level of visibility. I remember one of my friends, she was intersex and but like of trans identity, you could say. And back when trans identity was first really starting to come into pop culture, like to the degree that it is now and the way that it is now, she was like, yeah, well, that's all well and good, but I do think that like the visibility is making it less safe for us. And, you know, listen to people when they talk about their experiences and like what they want and what they don't want, because they're the ones who are living it. And I honestly feel like a lot of the time they might not necessarily know how anyway, they know what's best for themselves, even if they don't want to admit it. So that greater visibility that like is going to be experienced, I do think is going to potentially invite in a lot of this conflict that we're discussing. And it is important to act in your own self-interest, which is that doesn't mean like, you know, be a fucking sociopath and like exploit people and turn into 𝗂𝗵𝗍𝘁𝗍𝗂𝗍, because that's never a good look, to be honest. But it does mean like, you know, don't be a fucking people pleaser. You know what I mean? I do feel like it's a lot of relationships that are just like coming to an end, and that's because they were karmic relationships. As we ascend into the 5D New Earth timelines, the karmic relationships, they just cannot last. And yeah, I do think that, yeah, once again, as I said, it is about ideology and it is about praxis. So that is opposing the moon in Taurus. The chart I'm looking at, it's in the 6th house, and we have Uranus retrograde in Taurus as well, and it is opposing those two. Uranus is in the 7th house. So the moon and Uranus, which would be in an applying conjunction, they are going to be conjunct one another probably sometime in the 24 hours of me recording this. And I do think it is illuminating in our inner world feelings of difference. And I do think that it is causing us to like look back on the past and see how it has informed the present. And just, you know, yeah, looking at how like, I think it's supporting us figuring out where it is that we truly belong and what communities we truly belong in, and like, you know, in all of the ways in that divine counterpart, divine union way, like what job do you really belong in? What like career path, you know, like what environment, what city, state, country, institution, like all of those kinds of things. Like what kinds of relationships, what's your friend group gonna look like, you know, what kind of car are you gonna drive, because all of those things really do matter, like if you are in integrity or not. And I think that as like, as you purify, as you become more pure-hearted, like, it doesn't matter what you try to do. You can try to mask all you want, but people will still see that light coming from you, and they're gonna either fuck with it or not. And you can try to, like, get them to fuck with it even though they don't, and there's probably gonna make them like you even less. So, like, we reject and repel what isn't for us. Our heart does. And I do want to say, I do think that, like, certain people are projecting from a higher level of consciousness onto Earth, that they're not actually in Earth. I heard this guy, like, on TikTok earlier today talking about how he thinks that on Earth, like, humans are, like, top tier, and it's the best world on Earth, and, like, you know, heaven is bad and heaven sucks, and, like, they all work, like, God works for the earthlings and whatnot. And I'm just like, honestly, I feel like he probably is a flat earther, to be real, which is, like, no shade if you believe in flat earth. I guess I was being shady, never mind. But, like, you know, whatever. I just think he's wrong, because, like, for me and a lot of people I know who I know are high ranking, being incarnate is painful, like, literally painful. So I disagree, but go off, King. He said he realized that on shrooms. Just so you know, not everything that you realize when you're tripping on LSD or shrooms is true or real. But anyways, so there's that opposition going on. I do think that is significant, because with it in Taurus, it is talking about, like, in real, like, in our environment, really, truly, how we relate to our environments, and, like, whatever's occupying our environments. And that's intersecting the full moon. Moon in Taurus opposing the sun in Libra, which it doesn't sound right, obviously, because the moon was in Aries, but the full moon was, like, 2 nights ago. So we're still riding out that energy. I didn't do a reading for that, so I don't really know how to, like, backlog, but I do think that I mean, now that I say it, it's like, okay, that explains why there's been this, like, fractious friction energy, where it just feels like not even necessarily competitive as much as combative. I would encourage folks to, like, stay low-key right now, take it easy, like, you know, don't push yourself too hard, don't put yourself in situations where you're, like, overexerting. For me personally, like, full moon, well, I'm just like, oh, why am I so tired? Like, I'm so overstimulated, my body feels so sensitive, and it's like, yeah, it's a fucking full moon, that's why. It happens every fucking time. But I would say for people to, like, just take it really easy, be very gentle with yourself, make sure that you're creating enough room for yourself to, like, rest and get a lot of sleep, because I do feel like this particular moon phase has been, like, really impactful and really powerful. I do also feel like there's been a lot of, like, attacks going on, and yeah, that has to do with the veil being thin since Samhain last Friday. Anything else? I already talked about that trine in the last reading that I did. The fertile void, inner winter rest, patience, potency, secret beginnings. I really want to encourage people to not let your external circumstances dictate, like, your reality, because your inner reality is more real than your external circumstances. Your external circumstances are a combination of things, but mainly it's just like when you're looking into the night sky, and what you're seeing in the night sky has already happened, because all of the light in the cosmos only travels so fast that, like, for it to reach us and to reach our eyes to perceive it, it's already been traveling for a very long time. So when we look into the night sky, we are actually looking into the past, because what's actually happening in the cosmos is not what we can see, because we're too far away from it. So think about that when you think about like manifestation and like shit being real, as in it's more real inside of you versus what is happening external to you. Because I don't give a shit if you think that like, oh, like that thing that is definitely happening in the cosmos isn't happening because I don't see it. This is what I see. That doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what your perception of it is. It is happening, and we know it's happening. So you're going to see it eventually, but you know what I mean? That is the thing about humility, though. And yeah, that's just what I have to say about like, just do your best to not allow the external circumstances to dictate how you feel about yourself, how you feel about your life, what you feel capable of, because I do feel like there is like a lot of people struggling with like maintaining hope. And I feel like, you know, a lot of the readers that I watch say the same thing. It's like, oh, like this is coming to you. And I know that like you're probably tired of hearing people say that because they say it and it's like, well, when is it going to happen? And I feel that 100%. So, but I do know that like, as long as we contribute to, we do our best, as long as we do our best to contribute to what it is we are manifesting, and that does mean being, managing our emotions, if not controlling them. Yeah, that's what we're going to need to do. Okay? Because we're going to feel a lot better if we do. At least if I know that I'm contributing and I'm still doing my best and I'm still showing up, then it's out of my hands. And whatever else, like, I don't have to, like, stay up at night wondering, like, what else I could have done better. Which isn't necessarily true, but for all intents and purposes. Yeah, I think that's pretty much everything that I saw in the chart. And I just feel like I've been doing this reading for a while. 111 on the clock. The rose thread, inner call, soul led, the mystic, living courageously. I would encourage folks to do what lights you up, make art if that's what it is, dance, cook, what have you. Do more that's going to make you feel good and bring joy into your life because, yeah, there's just a lot of darkness in this world right now, and it totally makes sense to feel bummed out, but you be bummed out for a little while, and then you gotta invite the light back in. Well, you don't have to, but you could do that, and that would be helpful. Trust the seasons, embracing change, cycles of life, transition, growth. Oh God, I don't want to hear that. No, but yeah, I do think that that's exactly like what I was saying about like the fertile void and the rose threads. Like, you may not be exactly where you want to be, but like, as long as you're contributing your best efforts, and also trust your intuition. Don't push so hard, don't try so hard, because we are in a space of receiving, and like, how do we surrender to that experience? I have more that I could say, but I think that I'm gonna just leave it here. I love you all truly and deeply. Thank you. Thank you for watching. What to do like as a solution in terms of the conflict. I already answered that. Don't do it. Like, don't waste your time on people who are just like sick, like unwilling to grow, unwilling to change, unwilling to meet you where you're at. Like, if you already know that you're doing your best, then that's all that you need to do. And I honestly would say in a lot of situations, you don't even need to do your best. You know what I mean? Like, I think that people who are very proactive, can-do people who take accountability and like, look at themselves and just are constantly trying to become the best version of themselves. And this is what I said earlier in the reading too, is like, if you think that like being the best version of yourself means being perfect, like one day you're gonna get to be the perfect version, where it's like, okay, I said like some aspects of Libra that I don't like, and that's like the toxic expressions of Libra. And then there are toxic expressions of every sign, and there are positive, beneficial, generative expressions of characteristics of every sign. And like, you know what I mean? Nobody is ever going to be only the generative, positive expressions of every sign. That's not realistic. And also, that's not physics. That's not physics. Like, physics is the whole of everything. And the whole of everything is like, sometimes you're going to have a bad day. Sometimes you're going to be, like I said, you're only going to be operating at 10%. And that's just what the fuck it comes down to. But are you existing in community with people who, like, you know, y'all can give and take, and it's reciprocal regardless? Like, ideally, and you can talk about this in terms of like twin flame relationships, like people used to talk about this. It's like, ideally, you know, if you're committed to growth and other people are not, and I can say this from my own experience, like there are plenty of people who I used to be friends with who I am a very loyal person, 10 toes down, but they were not committed to growth the same way that I was. They were not committed to healing. They were not committed to abolition, transcendence of like sick, negative, like paradigms and ideologies and whatnot, the same way that I was. And so they knew that I was phasing out of their reality. They knew that, but I didn't want to admit that. And so I tried to hold on, and I tried to hold on by being quote unquote diplomatic and modeling good behavior and, like, you know, brushing aside the disrespectful little things that they would do or say, like the little backhanded shit that they would say, or the fact that a lot of the time they weren't happy for me when things went well in my life, And this is one way that you'll fucking know. If they're only a good friend to you when you're going through shit, but when your life is going well, they, like, y'all start to beef. I've had many relationships like this. Stay the fuck away from that person because they're throwing evil eye on you. Especially if they're somebody who does not train their abilities, if they're supernatural and magical and they don't spend any time training their powers, fuck that person. Say, like, you know, not fuck them, but, you know, God bless them, love them unconditionally, but, like, stay the fuck away from them because that person does not wish you well. That person has evil in their heart for you, and it will manifest. I have experienced this firsthand. And my teacher Paulvin actually talked about this in his most recent TikTok, which I reshared, and maybe I'll put it in the description box, but don't count on it because I know myself by now, and like, as much as I would like to be somebody who always puts everything in the description box that I say I'm going to, I usually don't. I just don't have time for that. Like, if I had an assistant, I'm sure that they could do it, but I'm just one person and I have a lot going on. So yeah, anything else that I need to say? Yeah, I phased out. They knew that I was phasing out, and I tried to people please my way into a forever friendship, and that never ended up working. It always ended up in, like, a huge blowout, usually with them exploding at me. And yeah, I mean, I would still maintain diplomacy because that's the kind of person that I am. Mind you, in true sidereal astrology, my Venus is in Libra, so there you go. But all of that wanting to be diplomatic creates an imbalance where, like, you know, you put up with shit for so long, and then you get to a point where it's like, all right, now I'm gonna fucking punch you in the face. Or like, all right, now I'm going to tell you what I really think and what I've been keeping from saying to you this whole time. And now you're going to really know what I feel like. That's very Libra. So this is why I know, and I really would encourage folks to, like, get this, is, like, don't bother trying with people who, like, have shown to you and proven to you that they're not willing to evolve, that they're not willing to be emotionally mature, that they're not willing to participate in nonviolent communication, conflict resolution. Some people, you gotta understand, just like 𝗂𝗪𝗍 said, and she would fucking know, some people are addicted to drama. You know what I mean? And I literally mean that. They are addicted to the chemicals, the neurological chemicals, and the biological cortisol, adrenaline, all of this stuff. They become addicted to it in their body because that's what they're used to growing up around. And that's what they need to feel normal. And when they don't get that, they go through withdrawal. And they don't even fucking know that that's happening to them. People who are addicted to drama and to conflict and bullshit, you gotta stay the fuck away from them. And that's what I'm talking about. Just be honest with yourself. It doesn't mean, I hate this person. It just means, like, I see you for who you are. You know, we don't have to fuck with everybody on earth. Like, that's seriously, I think that that's, like, a modern conception that, like, one, it's very, like, American, to be honest. And it's also very, like, post social media. Like, why are you following people that you don't like? Why are you, like, staying connected to people or staying on platforms that you don't like? You know what I mean? Like, let it the fuck go. Just let it die so that something can be something new can be born in its place that is actually generative and that actually makes you feel good. Stop doing things that make you feel bad. And I'm not talking about, like, oh, don't do your homework or don't eat your vegetables if you don't like No, that's not what I'm talking about. You know, like, what I mean is, like, don't stop doing things that, like, are harmful. You know, yeah, you should exercise, but you shouldn't push yourself to exercise so much that you're in pain. Like, you know what I mean? Like, I was pushing myself, like, in my cardio since I started unmasking. And I pushed myself so hard, and last time I was at the gym, I recognized, like, oh shit, 2 weeks ago, my ears started ringing, which is something that happens when I'm overstimulated, and I was in pain, and I realized, like, it's because 30 minutes of, like, hardcore cardio is way too much for me, and I got overstimulated, and my fucking alarm bells were going off, and I did that to myself because I was pushing myself to do something that I, like, shouldn't be doing. You know what I mean? Maybe 20 minutes, maybe 15 minutes is okay. But why am I pushing myself to do so much? Because somebody who has an ED and is orthorexic taught me that that's what I needed to do. But I need to let go of that. I need to disabuse myself of that because nobody should be doing those kinds of things to themselves. You know what I mean? Like, I shouldn't be hurting myself. Exercise, yeah, you should push yourself, but not to, like, a harmful extent. And I feel like people really need to, like, you know, develop a more sophisticated discourse around this, because I do hear people being like, you gotta put yourself in uncomfortable situations, like, in order to, like, you know, whatever. And it's like, yeah, but it's not that simple. And saying that, like, that kind of pop health discourse is not helpful because it's going to lead people to hurting themselves. You do that, like, with, oh yeah, you should do cold plunge and blah blah blah. It's like, yeah, but if you don't know how to sit through the cold plunge, you don't know how to do polyvagal breathing, you don't know how to, like, transcend the body and move into the transcendent self in order to sit through that, you're not going to be able to do it. But I also think that that is, in part, people need to start actually doing more research about the shit that they claim to be into, instead of just doing everything that you hear a 2-minute TikTok talk about. Like, you know what I mean? Anyway, I think that I've said enough. I think that, like, I've made, like, all of the points that need to come through clear. I do wonder when this energy is gonna kind of dissipate, and I think that, like, you know, a lot of the karmic shit is not going to stop until Saturn and Pisces are no longer doing this conjunction, and it's still a separating conjunction. I feel like they're going to finally be a little bit apart enough, like, when right now they're at about, like, 2.5. They're about 3 degrees of separation. They need to be at least 5 degrees of separation. They're both retrograde. They both need to turn direct. So this is why a lot of, like, rumination about the past is coming up. People from the past are coming up because of this retrograde energy. And it's all in Pisces. I personally, like, Pisces, I know ultimately peachy keen and lovely, but if you have a lot of trauma, Pisces is hell on earth, to be honest. But that aside, we also have Chiron here in Pisces, so I do feel like, you know, this conjunction needs to break for the end of all of this karmic shit. It's also gonna clear as they move out, these karmic signs move out of Pisces, which includes the North Node once it gets out of there. But in the more immediate, I do think that, like, when Mars gets into Ophiuchus, so when we are, like, coming up on Ophiuchus season, so we're gonna probably say, like, December, like, end of November, December, or, like, really, yeah, just in December, that's when we're gonna see, like, a lot of these shifts happen, where, like, all this karmic shit that's been surfacing, we're gonna finally be able to, like, get out of that limbo and move on into, like, a different way of being. But that is only if you've actually been doing the work. Because if you haven't and you're just being fucking karmic, you're gonna keep going around the same cycle. You're gonna have the same experiences and dynamics all the time. You're gonna feel the same. It's the same shit. Because if nothing changes, nothing changes. But if you've actually been doing the work to grow and to evolve and to heal and to, like, let go of what needs to be, like, done away with, then you will be able to transcend when Mars, especially Mars, gets to Ophiuchus. But I do feel that the point in time when Mercury is in Ophiuchus but Mars is in Scorpio, that might be a little bit uncomfortable. But it is you planning your escape. But I do feel it might be a little bit uncomfortable. It's either going to be uncomfortable if you feel like, you know, itching to go. But I think that it will feel better if you are, if you're making plans for whatever changes you are enacting in your life. So that's going to be it for me. I love you all truly and deeply. I hope that this was helpful. If you want to book a session with me, you are more than welcome to. I'd love to work with you. And you can do so via my Ko-Fi link in the description box. Yeah, that's it. Okay, bye.